Right, so as for the human respiratory system, before we get into it in terms of studying the structure and the different components or parts that make the respiratory system, this term that is known as respiration, of course, we should be able to know its definition in terms of explaining it and know the difference between respiration and breathing, because a lot of time persons have a tendency of saying that respiration and breathing is the same thing, which of course that is not the case, because they are completely different. So of course respiration is one of the characteristics of life, of living things. For those persons who would have looked at the 7 different characteristics of living things, and of course those are what we use to differentiate between living things and non-living thing. Now, respiration, it is normally the process by which living organism get the energy from food, nutrients, or food substances that they would have consumed. So let's say, for example, your body needs some energy to move from point A to point B. So respiration is the process that allow your body cells and your body parts to get that energy. So the second point I was saying that yeah, it is a chemical process which takes place in all living organisms. Because once an organism is termed to be living or considered to be living, then that organism going to actually need energy to basically move along or move from point A to point B or to carry out the different functions. So it is of course a chemical process. Release energy from food molecules or we can say nutrients or food substances such as glucose and fat. So glucose, of course, it is the end product of starch or carbohydrate digestion. So when you consume some food which contain carbohydrate, for example, any ground provision, so yam, dasheen, cocoa, plantain, banana, pumpkin, potato, breadfruit, all of those, rice, all of those are food that contain a high percentage in terms of carbohydrate, and the human body depend on carbohydrate mostly for energy. So not that the human body don't get energy from other nutrients, but carbohydrate is the nutrient that the human body depend on mostly for energy. Now when you consume those carbohydrates, let's say for example you eat a piece of yam, in that state that you swallow it, it is carbohydrate, or if you want to say complex carbohydrate, no problem. Now in that state, the human body cannot get the energy from the carbohydrate like that. So that is why you have a digestive system. So the digestive system now break down that complex carbohydrate in a simpler form or in a simpler format. And that is where glucose come into play. So glucose is the end product of carbohydrate digestion. Right, so glucose come from those carbohydrates. Now, the next concept that we need to know for respiration is that there are 2 types of respiration. One is known as aerobic respiration, and the other one is known as anaerobic. And yes, we're gonna look at those individually in terms of more detail. But for now, as for these 2 types of respiration, now the human body release energy via aerobic respiration and also via anaerobic respiration. The main difference between these two is that aerobic respiration, for this process, oxygen is needed to help with the release of energy, while for anaerobic, oxygen is not needed. So that is just one main difference between both types of respiration. So there are several others, but whenever we are looking at those 2 terms individually in more detail, that's when we will actually go into depth, as in more differences between those two. Right. So
Sir,
yes, yes, Walker.
yeah, can you please go back on the other page? I still finish right off the other page.
So all right. Walk. All right. So in terms of the notes, I would advise you, you don't have to use the class time to write the notes, because if you're using the class time to write the notes, then you might not understand a concept, which the notes I will be posting it in WhatsApp, so you can write the notes in your own free time. You don't have to use the class time.
All
Understand?
right, sir.
Right. So just ensure that you understand the notes, because I will send it in WhatsApp. Presently, it is in WhatsApp in the PowerPoint presentation, which I know that for some persons it's not gonna open, but I can convert. I normally convert it into different versions, like in picture version or PDF. So you will get it. Right, you will get it by the end of the class. I will send it to you, so you can write it in your own free time. Right. So if you can write, write, but don't allow to be distracted by the writing and you don't understand the explanation. Right. So as for respiration, the main concept that you need to know for respiration is that it is a chemical process that take place inside the human body cells where energy is released. While breathing now, breathing is basically the movement of air into and out of the lungs. Some textbook will say the movement of air into and out of the human body, which that is correct. So if I ask you to tell me the difference between breathing and respiration, you should be telling me that respiration is a chemical process by which the human body cells release energy, while breathing is a movement of air into and out of the human body, or if you want to say lungs. So right away, looking at those two definitions, you should be seeing that there's actually a great difference between breathing and respiration. They are completely different. Because breathing is talking about you taking in air, and that air, of course, would contain oxygen, and also you exhaling, meaning that you're giving off air, you're letting out air to the environment or the atmosphere. And that air, of course, will contain carbon dioxide. So there's a significant difference between breathing and respiration. So at this point in time, nobody should be mixing up those two terms, because they are completely different. They're not the same. But yes, they relate to each other, meaning that they both fall under the concept of we looking at the human respiratory system. But as for their meaning, and as for their concept in terms of how they relate to the human body in terms of functioning, they are completely different, as they would have two different roles. All right, moving on. So the respiratory system, in terms of the different structures or the different parts that make up the respiratory system, we're gonna spend some time looking at those major parts and their functions or roles. So we have what is known as the nasal passages, same thing that we layman we normally say the nose hole. So as you can see, it is pluralized. That is simply because we all have two nasal passages. Now, the function for it is to filter the air, warm the air, and moisten the air that is breathed in. And those three functions, they are very important in terms of our health. In terms of filtering the air, if you should get an extremely bright light. For example, those light that are in projectors. I don't know if persons would have realized that when the projector is turned on in the classroom, if you should look at the light exactly or immediately after the light leaving the projector device itself, you will realize that you're seeing some tiny particles moving in the air. That is simply because in normal environment, whether outside, inside, It does not matter how clean the environment is. We still have some small particles that we cannot see easily with our naked eyes. Now, if we should breathe in all of those particles and all of those particles should reach your lungs, then we'll actually be experiencing a whole lot of lungs infection. We would be easily affected by asthma. But that is not the case because the nasal passages they actually line with some small ears that are known as cilia, some ear-like structures that are known as cilia. Now, those are what are responsible for filtering the air that we actually breathe in. So, one function for the nasal passages is to filter the air. And that concept in terms of breathing in and filtering air, now we actually take in air into the human body via two passages through our mouth and also the nasal passages. It is just that there's an advantage and a disadvantage, meaning that when you breathe through your mouth, there's no filtering that take place. So if the environment is dusty, all of those dust gonna enter the human respiratory system. And some persons might question it and say, "Oh, can you breathe through your mouth?" Now, the next time you have a stuffy nose, meaning your nose stuff up, just open your mouth and you will realize that once you open your mouth, you're able to breathe much better. So that is an indication that yes, yes, James, James, I heard you ask a question, but I'm not sure as to what I'm not hearing you clearly. The question, what the two places where air enter the human body? I don't know if that's the concept you're asking for me to repeat. All right, well, I'm gonna just try to go over as best as possible what I would have explained a while ago, because I mean, I'm not recalling which question I would have stated specifically. Now, as for the concept in terms of human being taking in air into the human body, we we actually have two places that take in air. One, the nasal passages, and two, the mouth. It is just that I'm saying that there's an advantage and disadvantage, meaning that when you breathe through your nasal passages, those ear-like structures that are known as cilia, cilia. Now those they are able to filter the air, meaning that some small dusty particles that would be within our environment, the cilia will get rid of them. As for the mouth, that is not the case because there's no cilia. So you're just basically taking all of those particles. Now I was using an example in terms of a scenario saying that persons normally ask the question or question it if we can really breathe through our mouth. And I'm saying that yes, that is so. So, in terms of you wanting to confirm or convince yourself that that is true, I'm saying that the next time you're experiencing a stuffy nose, meaning that you have the flu or you have the cold and your nose stuff up. And we all know that whenever you're having stuffy nose, it is difficult to breathe. So I'm saying that you can try the experiment where you open your mouth when you are having that difficulty in terms of breathing. And I'm quite sure that you're going to realize that you're able to breathe much better when you open your mouth. And that is simply because the human body is designed that way so that you can breathe through your mouth. If you look at the diagram, the image that is on the screen, you will realize that the nasal cavity and the mouth basically join back to each other eventually at the throat region there, and that link up to the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe. Now, the next concept for the nasal passages, of course, they are saying that it also warm the ear and moisten the ear. Now, once you're breathing in, meaning that you're taking in air, persons need to understand that the environment normally entails different microorganisms, bacteria, virus, fungus. Now, when you breathe in all of those, the fact that the nasal passages warm the ear, meaning that in that process where it is warm in the ear, it is actually destroying some microorganisms, because by now we should know that microorganisms, if they are exposed to heat or if they are exposed to temperatures where they are not used to, then basically they will eventually die. So that's one of the reasons why the ear is warm. In terms of moistening the ear now, when the ear is moist, it have a tendency to move much more easier through the respiratory tract. The next component is known as the epiglottis, and this one has a very important function where it prevents food entering the trachea. So the section of the respiratory tract that is known as the trachea, that the epiglottis basically cover it. Now, whenever you're eating, all right, let me right. That's bringing up this image so you can see it. I'm gonna share the screen. Right, so this is an image of the respiratory system. Now, this section here represent the trachea. So this is the trachea, also known as the windpipe. Now, at the top section of the trachea, this is where the epiglottis actually located. Now, the image that we're looking at only showing the respiratory system, but in real life situation, there's another tube that runs beside, exactly beside the trachea, that is known as the esophagus, and that is a part of your digestive system. Then whenever you're eating, the epiglottis normally cover the trachea, because if food is repeat, James. James is saying something, but I'm not hearing you. Yeah, students are hearing me clearly.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you're hearing me clearly. So I'm wondering what happened. Oh, you're not seeing the. All right, other person seeing the screen. Yes, you're seeing the screen with the trachea with the image. Then James, I don't know why you're not. All comes you're not seeing the screen. Log out of the.
Our connection, the first connection might be bad also.
Oh, it might be weak. All right. I'm gonna send it on. What you use? Oh, okay. You using your phone? You using your phone? All right. The image I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna send the image in WhatsApp so you can look at it later. Then. All right. I send the image in WhatsApp. I hope that can help you. But you should be able to go in WhatsApp while you're on Meet. All right. So I'm saying that the trachea that you're looking at on the screen there, beside it in a real life situation, there's a other tube that is known as the esophagus, which is part of your digestive system. Now, while you're eating, the epiglottis that is located at the top of the trachea normally cover it to prevent food from entering the trachea. Because if food should allow to enter the trachea, then you're basically gonna choke. Now, while eating, if for some reason you decide to talk, then that epiglottis gonna open. That is simply because while you're talking, the epiglottis will actually open. So that's why they normally say that you must not eat and talk, because if you talk while you're eating, then the food going to go down the trachea. Simple because once you start to talk, then the epiglottis gonna actually open. That means say it a go allow food, for example, now to go down into the trachea. And once that take place, then you're gonna actually choke. That is why you will realize that once you're eating and you're talking, like for example rice, and you choke, the rice will normally come through the nose. That is simple because anything that need to come out of the respiratory system in terms of um, exhaling, it's gonna come through the nasal passages. Walker, you're saying something, Walker? Right. So the epiglottis, its function is to prevent food from entering the trachea. If it does, so that is if the food should enter the trachea, then you basically will cough it up. That's what they are saying. There's a next section that is known as the larynx. Now the larynx, in terms of functioning for the respiratory system, there's no known function for the larynx, for the respiratory system. It is just that based on its location, it is actually located on the respiratory system. So it is what is known as the voice box. That's where human being get the sound in terms of being able to talk. But in terms of the respiratory system, there's no function, there's no related function for the larynx. All right, moving on to the some other components or some other parts that make up the human respiratory system. We have the trachea slash windpipe. So that is simple because we can use any one of these terms once we're explaining that respiratory tract. So whether you want to say trachea or windpipe, no problem. So in terms of the trachea or the windpipe, so this is the trachea right here. So it is also known as the windpipe. So it actually link up or it actually join with both nasal passages and also the mouth. So if you look at the diagram carefully, you will realize that that channel that is coming from the mouth there and that channel that is coming from the nasal passages, they all join up and go and link up with the trachea. So every ear, whether you breathe it through the nasal passages or you breathe it through the mouth, all of the air that you inhale or take in will actually link up or enter the trachea there, and then the trachea will take it to both lungs. Now, persons need to realize that we actually have one trachea, but we actually have two lungs. So there is no way, it is not humanly possible for that single trachea to enter both lungs at the same time. So that is why the trachea basically branch off into two new structures, what are known as the right branchus and the left branchus. We call them bronchioles, which mean that these two tubes are what actually take the air that we breathe in into your lungs. So in terms of the concept, in terms of the air entering the human body, because I'm quite sure that I will be asking you to track the movement of air entering the human body from the time it enter the human body until it reaches the alveolus or alveoli. That's a question that I normally give for you to track the movement of air from the time it enter the human body and until it reaches the alveoli. Now, as for the trachea, it is made of a lot of cartilage, and if you look at it carefully again, you will realize that I see some circular shape or some wavy structural movement structures in terms of its design. Now, those are what are called the cartilage. Now, what the cartilage does is that the cartilage helps to keep the trachea upright, meaning that it actually, those cartilage prevent the trachea from collapsing, especially when there is no air within the trachea or the windpipe there. Right, so after looking at the trachea, it is now time to look at what is known as the bronchus. So we have a right one and we have a left one that actually take the air to the lungs. Because as I would have said before, there is no way that one single trachea can enter both lungs at the same time. So that is why it actually branch off into those two right and left bronchus in terms of structures. Now, once the right bronchus, for example, enter the right lungs, then it will actually branch off into some smaller particles that are known as bronchioles. So this that is what you're looking at the diagram there.